So my name is Matt Sloan, and my father was Kenneth C. Sloan, otherwise known as Square Deal Sloan. So my dad loved cars. That was his whole life. He raced them, he sold them, he fixed them, he built them, he collected them. Um, so that was my dad. He mentioned cars, and he knew anything and everything about them. I swear he could tell the name, the model, make, and the year just by the sound of it coming down the street. That was one thing that always amazed me. It's a '59 Buick, just by hearing it. Um, so my dad got into cars as a young kid. He grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey, in Camden, New Jersey, just outside there in Moorestown. And his uncle owned a car lot, and he got my dad into cars at a pretty young age. And he even told me a story, even at the age of 8. They drove from Camden all the way to New York to pick up a car with my uncle. And my uncle towed it back with my dad behind the steering wheel, pumping the brakes and steering the car all the way from New York back to Camden, New Jersey as an 8-year-old kid. Pretty amazing. So that was my dad. So my dad grew up around cars. He started racing cars in the 60s, and up and down the East Coast was kind of his area. So racing up and down the East Coast, and by far his favorite track was Lime Rock, Connecticut. Lime Rock track was, anytime my dad talked about racing, it would always come back to Lime Rock. That was his track. And there's this magnificent picture of my dad losing a wheel on the Big Bend. It's such a fantastic photo. I'll show it to you. This is my father losing his wheel right on the Big Bend. And that was one of his, he would bust that photo out for anyone to know or tell that story to. But it was in his blood. Whoa. Racing was in his blood. My dad was a race car driver. 60s, marriage and kids happened, so my dad decided to put racing on the backtrack, and got into selling cars. That's what he always did anyway, but that's how he made his living. And he sold cars for over 40 years. Sold used cars. He worked at all new cars. He worked at so many different dealerships up and down New Jersey, Connecticut, even upstate New York. And it was just, that's what he loved. That's how he earned the nickname Square Deal. My dad would be honest, straight up, even if the car was a lemon, he'd let you know what was wrong with the car, what needed to be fixed, what kind of deal you're going to get. And that's how he earned the nickname Square Deal. He loved it so much that we got a boat, and the name of the boat was Square Deal. So Ken Square Deal Sloan, that was my father. And he collected cars. We had a '49 Buick in the garage for years. Big Bertha. Ended up getting 42 Chevy Coupe, I believe. A '67 Cadillac. It was a beautiful car. A couple different cars over the years, and he loved them all. He treated them so well. Was in the car shows. Everybody knew my dad. Here comes Square Deal Sloan with this car. Earned so many trophies, but that was my father's love. My father loved cars. It wasn't maybe 5 years ago he was diagnosed officially with Alzheimer's. We started noticing things happening earlier than that, but we weren't sure. And Alzheimer's took my dad piece by piece. I think he was around 80, he lost his license, we couldn't drive anymore. We started noting a decrease in his language and his ability to do things, his speech. And my dad had the gift of gab. My dad would talk to anybody, anywhere. 95% of the time it was about cars. He would corner somebody at a party. And as Alzheimer's robbed him of that, of his gift of gab, and he was not able to do it. And life got very difficult after that. There's a car museum here, LeMay Car Museum, pretty famous museum, and they opened up a new one in Tacoma, Washington, and they have a simulator and you go in there and you can pick any track in the U.S. And I took my father to the car show and excuse me, the car museum, and we found this simulator and we just playing around with it, not knowing what to expect. We found the Lime Rock track, so I put my dad in the driver's seat, and he was driving and he couldn't figure out the controls, but he was talking the whole time. Oh, I know that this is Lime Rock. This is Lime Rock. Yeah, I know. And he didn't do that great driving, so I got in the car seat. My dad stood behind me, and he told me when to brake, when to gas it, what was coming next, every turn, every bank, every single detail he still knew, and he lit up like a Christmas tree. And after we finished, his spirit returned, and he was talking to the guy who ran the thing about every car he owned. And the poor guy was, just being as nice as possible, listening to every word of my father. But I just stood back in awe about the power that had on my father. And it was for a fleeting moment, he was back. My dad was back. Alzheimer's ended up taking my father this year, in the end of July. And at 84, he's passed on, and he left behind an incredible legacy, one mostly involving cars, and 3 children and 6 grandchildren and his wife. But every time I hear a car or I get the smell of gasoline, or I go to buy a tire shop, my dad's right there. And every time I hear a race on TV, the roar of the engines, my dad's right there, watching me. And I miss him so much. Behind me, I have some of his trophies that he's earned. There's only a few. We had to divvy them up between my sisters and myself, so I only have a few. But most of these are from Lime Rock. And here's the piece. Here's the piece. I believe, I don't quite remember the story. My dad told me it missed 1,000 times, but I've forgotten the details. And that's one thing I regret near the end of his life, is the onset of the Alzheimer's, is asking him more questions, because I didn't know what to expect. But this is a piece of the car from that photo where he crashed. And to be honest, I don't even know what it is. He can tell you in a second. But that was my father, Ken Sloan, Kenneth Square Deal Sloan, lover of cars, and he'll forever be a part of racing and cars, and I'm sure he's up there right now telling his stories to everybody that can listen. So I love you, Dad.